The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. This is Alan Brody, your host for today's session on 21 tweets for Twitter beginners, or 21 steps for Twitter beginners. We have speaking today Barry Feldman, and I'm going to tell you a bit about him in just a second. I want to remind you, or tell you for the first time, if you're with us for the first time, that we would like your questions through the chat window. I'll be monitoring both the question and the chat window. We prefer you enter your questions through the chat window. And Barry will be taking them perhaps during, perhaps at the end, depending on the question. But we'll get to all your questions by the end, no matter what. I see people are still joining, so it's well that I'm taking this time to explain what we're doing here. We just had a couple of people join here as I've been speaking. As to Barry is president of Feldman Creative. He creates compelling content by telling stories. He's a content marketing strategist, copywriter, creative director, speaker, and author. He specializes in creating websites, ebooks, and integrated online marketing programs. Barry recently published The Plan to Grow Your Business with Effective Online Marketing, which is a free ebook, and he would like you to have, share, and use it. We'll be talking about that later. If you'd like a piece of his mind, visit Feldman Creative and his blog, The Point. So those are my announcements for this morning. I'm going to hand you over to Barry, and have a great session.
All right. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, attendees, for being here today. That was pretty thorough, so I will spare you talking about myself. However, I'll point out here my logo if you want to interact with me or get the assets that Alan talked about, such as my ebooks. FeldmanCreative.com is the place, and the blog there, as he mentioned, is called The Point, and I contribute to that and many other blogs frequently, and you'll find a list of those on my homepage if you want to find me where I'm published elsewhere besides my own website. So I created 21 tweets for Twitter beginners pretty recently, maybe a couple months ago. And its genesis, I suppose, was answering questions for friends and clients who now consider me to be a Twitter expert. I don't know if that's accurate, but today I'm your Twitter expert, and I've been doing it for a couple of years, and I certainly enjoy it. I think if you forced me to tell you what my favorite social media is, the answer would be Twitter. Or at least if you ask me what is the social media that I'm most active on, the answer would be Twitter. And so as the name suggests, as the name suggests here, this is for beginners, and so I've created 21 tweets, sort of allowing the media to be the message to guide us through the agenda for today and talk to the many things that Twitter newbies seldom know. And that doesn't mean if you are a experienced Twitter user that you're in the wrong place. I hope you'll gain something here today. We will be talking about some intermediate, at least, or maybe even advanced techniques, and your questions will probably uncover some more of those. So feel free to ask questions. Alan will give me a heads up if it's like a pressing question, and if it isn't, we will reserve probably 20 minutes or so to answer questions at the end. And then Twitter beginners, I want to also say, may not be people who have never done Twitter before, because like is the case with most social media, there's a whole lot of Twitter refugees, in that people have signed up because they were told to, and they abandoned Twitter, or they did it for a little while and they said it didn't grow my business, so I'm out of here. And that's a pretty common scenario. So let's get started now and advance to the slide. I mentioned that the genesis for the program itself was answering questions, and what I started to do was tweet. And as you know, those look like this. At least I hope you know, if you're new to Twitter. We're not looking at Twitter, we're looking at Storify, which is a nifty little tool online where you can create blog posts rather simply by collecting posts you've made elsewhere, either on your blog or on Twitter or really just about any popular network. And so what I did, I guess it was contrived after I came up with the idea, was I made 21 tweets in a row. I tagged them with the name 21 Twips. Often on webinars you'll hear people say, ask me questions or comment while you're on Twitter using this, and you're welcome to do that, but I'm not looking at Twitter right now. My screen is completely this presentation. But after the presentation, if you want to talk about it or address me and get answers to your questions, the hashtag that you see here in blue, 21 Tips for Beginners, would be the way to do that. And if you want to tell people you're listening now, you might do that. I didn't make up a hashtag for this presentation as presenters often do, but maybe I can right now. Maybe it would be hashtag the OLP live. So if you do that, we'll check that out too. So Storify is what gave birth to all this thing, and I took a screenshot for you today, including my browser, so that when you get this presentation, if you want it, the URL's at the top here in the URL bar, so that you can refer to this instead of the slideshow or in addition to the slideshow. So now we begin with the 21 Twips, if you will. They're actually tweets, but probably 21 tweets was taken. Number one, what's Twitter? I think the word that comes up most often when you're defining Twitter is it's a micro-blogging thingamajig, social media network. It's a platform, kind of a generic name for all those things, and it's a place where you share your thoughts and news and information. And what makes it unique is that the inventors of Twitter decided that it was going to resemble text, I guess. Certainly not new to anybody here, and amazingly common and useful. And therefore they limited it more so than any social media to 140 characters, and that even counts spaces and the links that you include and so forth. And so that's what makes Twitter unique. Posts at Twitter are called tweets. You'd have to be trapped under something large and heavy to not have discovered that. It's even a popular medium on television now. And if you watch a Sports Center like I do, or really any reality show or contest program, you'll hear the host talking about the tweets they're getting. So that's what Twitter is. Its growth has been phenomenal, perhaps not phenomenal as compared to Google Plus or Pinterest, because it's not as new as those. And so it probably came along before social media was as mainstream as it is now. I think it started in 2007. I believe it has 200 million users, and take that with a grain of salt because they're not all active. But I just read something, this comes from an infographic, and the infographic's not about Twitter so much as about social media at large, and it's one of the many things that I've included in the last slide today that you can reference later. And it offered this interesting fact. It said Twitter tops B2B lead generation, outperforming Facebook and LinkedIn 9-1. 82% of social media leads come from Twitter. So that's rather impressive. Now anybody can really make a case for anything with statistics, and the topic of today's presentation is not social media marketing or B2B social media marketing, but if you are here to learn about social media marketing, certainly you'd want Twitter in your arsenal. And if you are doing B2B and you're in the 18% who are in the small percentage of people that aren't using it, you're making a mistake. So my plea for you is to gather this information and get busy on Twitter. That is not to say abandon Facebook and LinkedIn. They all have their strengths, and certainly Twitter has a lot of them. The reasons you might become Twitter enthusiast, user, fanatic is to generate leads, and as I said, this is not a social media marketing presentation, so we won't dig deeply into that, but it is a reason, and perhaps it's your most important reason. Build authority. You're going to become a blogger, so to speak, even if you don't blog. This is a microblogging platform, and so if you're going to talk about the area of expertise that is your discipline, you're hopefully going to create a following and people that trust you to answer their questions. You're going to build relationships. If you pressed my fingers to the fire and said, why social media? I would tell you it's to build relationships. And with Twitter, you're going to be able to do research. You're going to be able to ask questions and get answers to your questions, much like you would on the internet at large. So that's what's Twitter and what it's for. Perhaps a little bit of a redundant question, but things I haven't mentioned up until this slide now is that it's free. I've never heard of a paid version. Twitter does have a monetary model now that includes advertising, but you can largely ignore it. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink again. Or you could choose to use it and sponsor your posts, which is a nice name for advertising. It's global, which is really cool. I mean, I have friends and associates all over the world now that I can definitely attribute to being involved in Twitter. And it's fun. I love Twitter, and I think if you use it, you will too. It has a bad stigma associated with it that, people are just tweeting nonsense. I had this for breakfast, I'm going to go to bed now, that sort of thing. Certainly celebrities have used Twitter, and perhaps it's most well-known usage of Twitter is like if you follow Justin Bieber or LeBron James or something, they're using it as sort of a real-time newsletter, and that might be where the stigma comes from, of course. And then Twitter abusers put just about anything on Twitter. But in a working community, particularly B2B, I would think Twitter is kind of a miniature news source. When somebody does something amazing, or a catastrophe strikes, or a famous person dies, invariably I learn about it first on Twitter. But the reason, I could also follow, USA Today or any news source. I'm not there for that. I'm there to make connections and build relationships, like I mentioned. And so I think that is numero uno for what Twitter is for, is to make connections. And those might be friends if you're using it for social purposes. They might be clients if you're using it for lead generation. But above all, I think it's for building a tribe, a word that you hear a lot in social media, of like-minded people, and make connections. And like I said, I have connections all over the world now thanks to Twitter. So who's on it? 200 million people. I didn't do research to tell you, what percentage of them are men or women and what age. I know that it's growing amongst the younger set, like Instagram is, and there seems to be a little bit of an exodus from Facebook. My kids are 12 and 14, and they think Facebook's pretty uncool. I try to stay out of it. They're on Instagram a lot, and there is a move towards younger people coming onto Twitter, I think because of its immediacy. And there is a move towards older people. I use the word carefully because I guess I'm one, but the demographic that I think is 50 to 65 is the fastest growing demographic in Twitter. And I think that's because it's really easy, and if you don't think it's easy, it's probably because Twitter language. I think newcomers to Twitter, probably why I did this show in the first place, they look at hashtags and @ signs and abbreviations, and they go, well, they're speaking some foreign language, and I'd rather just write email or stick to Facebook where it's in English. Well, that's because of the character count limit, like we talked about, 140 characters. So there is a lot of abbreviations on Twitter, and 30 minutes from now you're going to know what they are. Now, Twitter can be used in private. That's not a well-known fact, and it's not a well-used thing. And so what you're going to do on Twitter is going to be public, and your purpose should be to make new friends and build new relationships, and perhaps recruit new partners and clients. So you're going to do what you do before the world. Keep that in mind if you're sort of prickly mood or whatever. It's 2 o'clock in the morning and you just came back from the bar. Or Twitter is a public domain, and everything that it defaults to is going to make your stuff seeable everywhere from everybody, at least everybody that follows you. And everything's archived, and so it's hard to kind of undo your mistakes. So just like when you post a picture of yourself on Facebook and you know that it's permanent, think about what you say on Twitter and understand that it's a public forum where people are there to actively follow and converse with each other and share content. Was a R tweet? Maybe I shouldn't have tried to say that. What's an RT? RT is an abbreviation, and it's the first of them, and perhaps the most common one you'll see. And it stands for retweet, which is the name given to a tweet that comes from me or you, but is based on a tweet that already exists. So as a Twitter user, you're going to be looking at your page or your profile. You might call it your timeline. I think that term actually comes from Facebook. But when you go to Twitter by default, you're going to see a slew of tweets coming at you. And if you want to share them, you click retweet. And I believe RT is invoked automatically. Excuse me. I'm not positive about that, but that's what an RT is. It's a retweet, and it means I'm sharing something. And if you're doing that correctly, I think even if you don't touch that and that Twitter user has their @ in there, something we'll get to. This is a real chicken and egg scenario here, pardon the pun. I'm going to use terms that we'll get to later. But when you take a tweet, try to share it, which is largely what you're going to be doing on Twitter. I would think at least half of more of your activity on Twitter is going to be sharing content. It's called a retweet, and it's really key. If you never do that, you're never going to make the progress you hope to on Twitter. You're going to want to endorse people's content. So for instance, if you saw this tweet that we're looking at here and you hit retweet, it would say @FeldmanCreative. And so I'm going to get a heads up on that. And that often is the beginning of a relationship and perhaps a conversation. So that's how Twitter works. What do you find on Twitter? You will find 4 views. We're not looking at Twitter. I took a screenshot and I'll share that with you. And when we answer questions, probably be a good idea for us to be looking at Twitter. So chances are pretty good we'll use my Twitter feed, and I have that open on another screen. But what you'll find there really is 4 views, and if you don't mess with those, you're going to land at what is called home. And this is your stream of tweets. These are people you follow tweeting. So you'll get updates from whoever you follow, and that will be not so overwhelming if you're new to Twitter and you follow a handful of people, and that'll be amazingly overwhelming if you follow thousands of people. And so we'll get to that too, this sort of tension that newbies to Twitter suffer from, like how can I keep up with all that? We'll talk about that briefly. But you know, the answer ultimately is you can't. But what you'll find on Twitter is a stream of tweets. We talked about before is 140 characters or less, or people having something to say in a microblogging way, or sharing something that somebody else said. And 4 views that you'll find on Twitter if you have a Twitter account and you go to the Twitter page, on the left are home, designated by a house as you're used to seeing, in this case a birdhouse, and connect, designated by an @, and discover, designated by a hashtag, or phone people call it #, and then a me page, or your profile page, designated by a little silhouette of a person. And so real quickly, what those look like when you click them, or what those mean to deliver, is your home page is the feed of tweets that people have made. The connect page, or the @ page, is called interactions and mentions, and so that's going to at the very least include tweets that have your Twitter name, often called Twitter handle, in it. So for instance, you can see here on the slide, the first thing you see in blue is @FeldmanCreative. So Twitter users, whether it's ego-based or marketing-based or just out of curiosity, are going to want to know people that have either mentioned them or addressed them, and the easiest way to find that is on the second screen, which is the connect screen. And then the third screen is the hashtag screen. This is tailored for you by Twitter, with robots figuring out what you're actually interested in, based on the subject matter you tweet, perhaps your profile, and most importantly, the people you follow. So that's a page on Twitter where you'll want to spend some time. And then the 4th page is me, and so you're looking at your Twitter page. And keep in mind, most people don't look at your Twitter page. They might look at it for in the first time they've come to know you, to decide whether to follow you or not, but that could be the last time. But there on your Twitter page, you'll see your profile, which you can update, and we'll talk about that, and statistics that indicate how many people you follow, how many people follow you, what direct tweets you've received, yet another term that we haven't got to yet, and we'll talk about that too. So what's up with the @ this, I guess, came to us, first with email, and now it stands for sort of all things interactive, but nobody's made the @ sign as famous as Twitter. And the @ sign, first of all, is your Twitter handle, your name, and again, you can see the example is mine, @FeldmanCreative, and it's a way to reference anybody's name or handle in a tweet. So, for instance, if you're tweeting something about this topic, Twitter lesson or beginning or this this webinar, you would use @FeldmanCreative, and that might mean something to people who are familiar with me or my company, and it would also get my attention because Twitter will show that to me, and there's lots of aftermarket products that we might use and talk about today if we have time that would say, hey, Barry, somebody just mentioned you as demonstrated by this @ sign. So that's what's up with the @ sign. It's a mention. There's actually a product called Mention too, not to go into the Twitter aftermarket already, but this @ sign is all important for naming yourself and tracking yourself and others. How about a little privacy? Yeah, Twitter, when you text somebody, I guess you like to think that's between you and them. Certainly that's the intent, but it could become public in a hurry. But if you want to use Twitter to send email, we come across yet another abbreviation, in this case DM, and that stands for direct message. So it's not flexible like email in that you can go on and do whatever you want, perhaps cut and paste things. But if you're having a Twitter conversation or you want to say, you want to talk directly to me, you can only do that if I follow you. And then in the interface of Twitter, you can use a pull down that gets it so that what you're going to type next is going to be seen only by me. Another way to do this is to precede what you're going to say with a D, capital or lowercase. You type D space @FeldmanCreative, and I'll get that in the form of what's called a direct message, provided I follow you. So you might even see this. I use it often. You're trying to direct message someone, but you can't because they don't follow you. So you have to address them for the first time in public. So you could use the @ sign. So let's say you're trying to get my attention and say, Barry, I want to let you in on a dirty little secret that I don't want the world to see. You might say, Barry, follow me. And you'd have to do that with an @ sign. And then I think you can assume I would. There's no harm in following somebody, so it's not a big decision. You can always unfollow them later. And so you will see people make that plea to each other to follow me because they want to have DM conversations, which is kind of cool. It's kind of like email meets chat. But what's a hashtag? This is probably the first lesson of Twitter in terms of like the foreign abbreviations. And a hashtag, it doesn't mean exactly what it meant when Twitter invented it. Maybe that's not true, but it's not as important as when Twitter invented it. What they invented it for was to allow you to do searches. And when you did a search preceded by a hashtag. So let's say that hashtag was hashtag OLP or hashtag paralegal or something like that. You are now speaking to like-minded people about a like-minded subject. The reason I say it's not as important as it used to be is it's not, you could do that with or without a hashtag. You could do a search on Twitter or the many tools that you use to search Twitter. But a hashtag is an indication you're doing it on purpose. And the reason people use a hashtag such as hashtag 21 Twips is because they want to speak to each other. So it's also used to start chats. There's different names for those, but generally they're called Twitter chats. And they're often related to events. And so a hashtag, from a definition point of view, it marks a topic and it allows you to find tweets based on it. And the coolest thing about a hashtag is you can click on it. So if you are just looking to get started and you're looking to build a following or people to follow based on subject matter, you would do hashtag subject matter, and then you would find a whole bunch of them. Twitter search is much more effective than social media search at large, read Facebook, but Twitter search is a power tool, and then the hashtag is a power tool to the nth degree to amplify it. So if you find a hashtag, click it and you'll see what I mean, and you'll then be looking at tweets that only included that hashtag, which is a real great way to get involved in a conversation and figure out what you should be doing and who you should be following. Like any social media, Twitter has profiles. You also have a limited amount of space to create one. I think it's 160 characters, so you have to be pretty selective with what you have to say about yourself, and therefore you're going to want to use keywords that define you, much like you would when you're setting up your website for the first time. How would people find me? What are the keywords? Alan mentioned that I'm a content marketing strategist, copywriter, and creative director. So in my profile, you'll find those words, and that's rather deliberate because people get on Twitter for the first time. I'm hoping they search for people like that. So keywords are very important. You're going to want to use a photo. I just wrote a story. It hasn't been published yet. It's going to be published next week, I'm told, for Marketing Profs, and it's going to be funny, perhaps ruffle a few feathers. I'm going to tell you in that story your photo should be a picture of your smiling face. This is not a place to get creative. This is not a place to do branding with your logo. It's not a place to show off the fact that you have children or pets, or that you travel, or that you're a great photographer, or that you're clever, or that you have a photo filter, or you know how to crop your head down the middle. Think of your profile picture as what you would do when somebody introduced you to somebody at a party for the first time. I believe you would shake their hand and smile. And so in your profile should be a relatively close-up shot of your beautiful face, and it says, "Hi, you want to know me. We're going to get social together." Can I make my page look cool? Yes. You can spot people that don't understand this by noticing in the background of your Twitter page, particularly on a large screen such as a desktop computer, that they have not discovered this, and so I think you'll find like a gray-blue bird scenario. And then there's wallpaper that Twitter provides that makes it so you could move over to the pink one or what have you. But in customizing your Twitter profile or presence, much like any other social media network, there's lots of templates and tools and instructions, and so your Twitter background can be a thing of great beauty if you're using it for business. I would definitely put a little time, perhaps effort, and perhaps even money into making that look web page-like. A weird little thing about Twitter is that it's going to sort of dynamically size to the size of the screen, and so the important information that goes in your Twitter background should be as far left as possible, and you should be real careful about that. You should limit that to things that really could serve as a sidebar on a web page, because on smaller screens you won't be able to see what's on the left side. So my Twitter page is an example. It simply has my logo and a little tagline, but people there publish information about themselves. They often publish other URLs or books they've written or events they're appearing at, and so think about that, but don't decorate the whole page, because it'll be hidden beneath the Twitter page. Okay, I'm trying to advance the slide and it's giving me a hard time. Here we go. Are you listening? This is advice that you may or may not take. I give it to every Twitter beginner, and that is sort of saving you embarrassment perhaps further down the line for being a reckless Twitter user. What I recommend, you pick the time frame. It depends on how active you're going to be. If you're going to spend a whole day stalking Twitter, that'll probably do. But if you're just going to spend a few minutes a day, I recommend you spend a week, maybe more, keeping quiet, setting up your profile, following people, but not tweeting a lot, and listening and clicking on hashtags and doing searches and looking at followers and who the people that you follow actually follow. So that's listening. You're researching Twitter. You're figuring out what's going on. So before you start tweeting, you simply hang out on Twitter for the amount of time that you can and watch the tweets fly by, and you'll learn perhaps a lot more than you'll even learn here today. You'll see how people behave on Twitter, how to fit in, and perhaps how to stand out. How do you retweet? Now, this is a tough one. We're not going to have time to get into the Twitter aftermarket to any degree. If you are on Twitter, and this is kind of a beef of mine with Twitter, but I'm sure that they've heard this one before, and there must be a reason for their madness. If you're on Twitter.com, the network Twitter, and you find something you like and you click retweet, it says RT and then it says the tweet, and that's that. And so that's fine. There's certainly going to be times when you choose to do that. But a more interesting retweet is when you actually have commentary or something to say. So you'll often see people giving Twitter advice saying to not consume 140 characters. I often see the number 120 characters, which they get consumed fast. But that leaves 20 for somebody to say, this is cool, or must read, or awesome, or pull a quote out of what you wrote. So when you compose an RT, it's easy to do on the many aftermarket products that you might use. The one that I endorse and recommend wholeheartedly is Hootsuite. And you simply have the ability to start typing before or after and use colons and carets and so forth, parentheses, to make it obvious what the original tweet was and what your addition was. However, that's not the case on Twitter, and I don't know why, and hence my beef. So if you hit RT on Twitter or retweet, you're stuck simply sort of amplifying or repeating what was there. And so if you want to retweet on Twitter and say something, what you would do is copy and paste the Twitter into a reply instead of retweet. And then you can go about it like you would with Hootsuite. You can type before or after. And then there's, of course, a lot of places where you'll see tweet this or follow me all over the web, and particularly on blogs. And so those don't typically make it difficult to say something. And then comes another abbreviation that you'll see from time to time. It's not very commonly used, but you'll see it, so I'll point out it to you so it's not a mystery, and that is MT. So instead of RT, it's MT, and MT means you moderated it. It's not important, but if you want people to absolutely know that your retweet was not automatically retweeted at Twitter and you have something to say, you would replace the R with an M. Oops, what slide were we on? All right, the 14th tip. Twitter's available for your Android devices and your iOS devices, so if you want to use it, or even if you don't want to tweet because you don't like typing on those tiny little things, but you just want to know when somebody mentioned you or you're following a post you did or a story, go ahead and get the device. It's also available as an app. I'm a Mac snob. I don't know how that would apply to the PC world, but in the App Store at Apple, you can have a Twitter-specific application that's always open if you don't want to use it only based on a browser. And then Twitter allows you to make your tweets by text, I think by email. There's quite a few options here, so it does indeed travel well. So I mentioned the aftermarket a number of times before, and I say here that it's flocking huge. So in the end here, I'm going to mention a few favorites, but there's probably 100,000 Twitter tools, easy to spot by clever little bird names. Often they start with twit or tweet or some form thereof. Just really something starts with TW. You get a pretty good indication that it's for the Twitter aftermarket, and they're everywhere, for monitoring, for searching, for researching, for pulling statistics and analytics. And so have a look if you're interested. It's not important and it's not beginner material, but you'll find some frustrations with Twitter, perhaps even searching. Like I mentioned before, the Twitter search tool is a good one, more so than other search tools on other social media. But I found myself searching for a Twitter search tool because I wanted to specifically search profiles, and I found a tool to do that. And there's a tool to do everything. The best tool is Hootsuite, and it was part of Twitter or social media dashboard wars a couple of years ago. And I don't think any of the ones that I mentioned, otherwise Twitter feed and TweetDeck, I don't know that any of them are dead. I think some of them were acquired by Twitter and other companies, but the one that sort of rose to the top and became the de facto is Hootsuite. And when you get to it after having a Twitter account, you'll come to appreciate why it's so great. You can kind of monitor lots of feeds and hashtags and ads at the same time, and all on a single screen. And in fact, you can even monitor multiple social media with Hootsuite. So if it's a tool you're unfamiliar with, and you are now in that like sort of frightening social media overload thing, sort of state of mind, go check out Hootsuite, and they're helpful there if you have questions, and I'd be happy to answer them too. One thing that causes Twitter users undue stress is they start following, large groups of people, and it gets in the hundreds or thousands, and they go, I can't keep up. This is nonsense. There's so much noise. Well, you can't watch everything on TV. You can't read every newspaper. And even though you like to think you can keep up with your Facebook timeline, you can't keep up. And so it's not important to get on Twitter and track back 24 hours or a week if you haven't been there for a week. Look at what's going on right now. And most importantly, if you are trying to keep up because you're trying to keep your finger on the pulse of something that you are interested in, Twitter allows you to stratify your connections by creating lists. And it's probably not a webinar unto itself, but we could get into that, and we're not going to. But be aware that you can create lists, and the reasons are many. I have a resource at the end of this presentation based on a story I just saw today for the first time about how to use lists and why to use lists, and how to publish your lists, and how to snoop in on other people's lists. That's a good tip right there. You're new to Twitter. You find somebody that has sort of similar interests as you. Maybe you know them via the OLP, and then you can look at who they follow or who follows them and make a list like that. So I'll get notices pretty often that I was added to a list of writers or content marketers or social media advisors and so forth. And so creating lists is a great way to take what's going to be an ocean of tweets that might otherwise stress you out and stratify it such that you're only following an area of interest, or you're only following an event or a group, or like the slide says here, whatever. You can make lists for anything. What's happening on Twitter? On the left side of Twitter at the bottom, and I say that with some fear because these social media tend to redesign their interface often, but right now on the left side of Twitter on the bottom it says trends, and that's a great tool. You see some trend there, like a famous person's name, you think they did something great, or they did something stupid, or they died, and so things get hot on Twitter, often tracks to pop culture and television. So if you keep your eye on what's trending on Twitter and you click in that list, I think it's a top 10, you'll know instantly what you didn't know before, such as a natural disaster. If you have Twitter open, you're going to find out anything happening in the world first on Twitter. That's how immediate it is, and of course people are using it with their smartphones, and so it's very immediate. And so Twitter tailors the trends for you, so that list is likely to be you specific in terms of who you follow and what you're interested in. And then if you want to, I don't think too many people do this, but you can tailor them yourself. Let's say you only use Twitter to follow sports or the stock market or something. You can go into the trends thing, I think it says change there, and go crazy with tailoring the trends to be specific to your interests. Now here, I guess my pop can here, never seen what pops up, covers some of the areas of a tweet I'm talking about, but I'm glad that I am presenting this in format which is enlarged. If you look at that soda can there, in the things to the right of it, there's a fair number of little dealy-bobs there, and they're blue because they're links, but if you don't click them, you simply mouse over them, you'll see all these Twitter tools, many of which we've mentioned before. So if you mouse over a tweet down below, you'll see the things that Twitter allows as shortcuts. And so one of them is favorite, which is kind of cool. You can save tweets you want to get back to later or keep forevermore. Maybe you wanted to comment on them but you don't have time. Maybe they said something nice about you or something you wrote or your company, and you might use that later to embed it on a blog or what have you. You can favorite it. So that's a great tool. I use it often. You can buffer it. I think that's in there now. Buffer is or was an aftermarket tool. It's made such that you can tweet stuff on a schedule, which is kind of important. If you get active on Twitter for a half hour and decide to, read a bunch of stuff and tweet a bunch of stuff, you'll annoy people if you've done that all within the space of a minute or 5 minutes, because they, not only can't they keep up with their Twitter feed, they can't even keep up with you. And so Buffer allows you to spread out your tweets over time, which is real useful if you don't want your tweets to be ignored. And then there's a little more button. I guess I skipped the obvious ones, but reply and retweet, we've talked about that. And then there's a more button. I think it's indicated by 3 dots, and it creates a little tear sheet itself or pull down. And in there it says you can email a tweet, which I don't know that you'll do that a lot, but you can do that. And embed a tweet, if you don't know what that means, it simply means you are going to be offered code, so that if you have the skills to create web pages, you can use the code to embed a tweet. So if you copied that code of this tweet and pasted it into your blog, it would look exactly like this. And another tool that I commonly do on Hootsuite, Twitter makes this a little tricky, but it's there for you once you understand how to do it, is you can save searches. And I do that as a blogger. I do that for like my most recent, let's say 2 to 5 articles, see how they're doing, see if people are asking me questions, see if the article's well received or not. And certainly if you had nothing like that to save a search for, the place to begin with saving searches is to search for yourself. Your name, your Twitter handle, your brand, your company, maybe sub-brands of your company, such as a product name and services, and then you're doing what's called monitoring. You're monitoring social media. And so you're going to do that. You don't want to start from scratch every time you do that. That should be a habit of yours as you get into social media. And so let's say you're doing a search for your company name. That probably should be first. You save it. I took a note here as how to do that. Oh, okay, you do a save, and in the top right of Twitter is a gear. And under that gear is a few things you can do, and embed again and advanced search again. But most importantly, you can save your search. And then when you go to use the search bar or search field in the future, you'll find that you have saved searches that will remind you of that, and that will spare you the process or the pain of having to do it all over again. We talked about this. This is definitely not beginner material, but you'll find social media marketers and content marketers and online marketers use Twitter chats a lot. And in some cases, they're scheduled weekly or monthly. The first Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, we will talk about whatever the field of expertise is. And so those are happening all the time. The most common instance, or at least the most common instance in my realm, is for events. So you're going to a conference or even a webinar, and people are using Twitter as a place to conduct a real-time dialogue. So when you see this, I want you to recognize that that's called a tweet chat, and they are given hashtag names, and people interact with each other live. It's a great way to build an audience. I don't host one, but I'm thinking of doing that. And if you have questions for this presentation and we don't get to them today, I encourage you to take note of this, 21 Twips, and I'll do a save search for that and keep my eye on it. And provided I can answer the question in 140 characters, I will. And if it's a longer answer than that, I'll send you my email or point you to a resource that answers your question. So, it's good for that too. The chat thing or the tweet chat, in addition to being a real-time thing, sort of lingers on forevermore. Now, massive topic here that we could do a separate webinar on, kind of like finding your voice in social media or as a blogger or a microblogger. But at the very highest level, if you're stressed out about like, well, what do I tweet about? Why do people care what I have to say? That type of thing. I would say, just be yourself and get comfortable in your own skin. Don't try to become a journalist or a newscaster or some sort of authority on something you're not. Try to ask questions. Try to answer questions. Be engaging. Try to provoke people. Get them thinking. That's how you use Twitter or social media at large. But in general. But I say Twitter for a reason. You have to get to the point. And so you can be engaging by being interesting and asking interesting questions. And most importantly, be valuable, and you be valuable by saying, I just read this and I think it's cool, or I just attended this and I think it's cool and informative. I just discovered this, I wrote this myself. You're there, particularly from a marketing point of view, to offer value to readers. You can use Twitter to follow your favorite, NBA star or celebrity and to just sort of, give people the blow-by-blow of your life, but that, most people don't like that. And you're probably not famous, so don't assume people care that much about what you're eating, or what, when you're going to go to sleep, or when you're going to take your animals or kids to the park. And try to be valuable with what you have to say on Twitter, and take the blow-by-blow of your life over to Facebook or offline, or direct tweets if you have to use Twitter for that. So I'm done. I'm looking forward to answering your questions. I probably talked for longer than I said I would. This picture of me is me being sort of the class clown at a conference. I carried around a Sharpie and asked people to write their Twitter handles on me, and this picture was taken at a Ford booth early in the day. If you saw that shirt now, you would see that it would be very hard to find a place to write on it. So I had a lot of fun with that. I'm at Feldman Creative. I mean that, from a Twitter point of view, that's my Twitter handle. That should have been pretty obvious by now. And I'm also at that for my email. My email is barry@feldmancreative, and I'm also at that for my website, which is feldmancreative.com. You see down below. I'm going to make this presentation available to you. If you're signing up for Twitter right now, go ahead and follow me. If you want to do it later, this link will take you there. And some of the things I mentioned today. Storify. I'm gonna make this presentation available to you. I'll either offer it to the OLP, or I'll put it on SlideShare, or I'll put it on my website, whatever's convenient for you, or I can even send it to you. And I mentioned this one. This is where the story all began, with those 21 tweets. I mentioned this. If you want to discuss this webinar later, or address a fellow user or attendee, or ask me a question, use this hashtag. This is a great resource for all things Twitter, appropriately titled All Twitter, or that's the subsection of a great website that speaks to social media at large, called Media Bistro. Some of the things I said here today came from a infographic, or no, from a ebook. It's really about social media marketing on Twitter, but you might find that interesting. If you did a search for this name, you'd find that. They mentioned a infographic where I got this fact from, that I read to you earlier down below here, with the 9 to 1 and 82%. So that's where that came from. This is an advanced tip. You get into Twitter, and a lot of people come to your website because of Twitter. It's a fun tactic to create a landing page specifically for Twitter. It says, hi, I'm glad you follow me on Twitter, and here's some of my resources, and here's how to reach me, and that sort of thing. We're not looking at Twitter, so I thought we'd look at a microscopic slice of Twitter. This is the top left. I mentioned there's 4 views of Twitter, and we talked about the icons. The default is home. That's what you'll see when you get there, and these are the 3 that we talked about. You'll go over to here to customize your profile and background and so forth. So that's the welcome bar I mentioned here. And then I mentioned that I just saw a story today about the reasons to have Twitter lists and the benefits of it, and I rushed over to bit.ly to make that a much shorter URL so that you can use it, and you might get this presentation and click that later, or copy and paste that, or even write that down. So let's go back to the previous slide, so we're not looking at these things. Oops. I'm ready to take questions. Alan, did we get any?
Yes, we did. Let me give you the first one. Are there different kinds of Twitter accounts, personal or business, entertainment, etc., or just one kind?
Once again on that one?
Are there different kinds of Twitter accounts, personal or business, entertainment, etc., or just one kind?
Oh. You can have any kind you want. You can have as many Twitter handles as you want. Excuse me for a second. I have a feeling answering these questions is going to involve the web, so we're going to go over to my browser. If you mean like as compared to Facebook or Google Plus or maybe Pinterest now, where you have a personal page and you have a professional page, often in other social media they call your personal page a profile and they call your business one a page. The answer is no, but you can set that up. I have two Twitter accounts. I generally don't refrain from, if I want to brag about my kids or something, doing that at Feldman Creative, but officially speaking, where social media has like different features and benefits and tools and things you can or can't do because of the business versus the personal, the answer is no. All Twitter accounts are alike, and if you have, if you want to have a sports one, go ahead and make a sports one.
Okay. The next question I have, one of our attendees thinks we skipped TWIP number 11. Is that possible?
Uh-oh.
I know you've already switched over here. Maybe we should take the questions first and then check that out.
No, I don't want to skip any slides.
All right.
What? All right, I'm on PowerPoint. I'm not much of a PowerPoint user. What do I want to be in? Present or slideshow?
Slideshow and then go to 11.
All right, so
that's all right.
Bear with me on the other end. This is probably dizzying.
No, it's fine.
Who should I follow? Yeah, I can't recall talking about that. And it's such a cute picture. I'm glad that question came up. Okay, you got to Twitter, and you're going, oh, this looks cool. Who do I follow? Follow your friends. Hopefully people in this conversation are people that you do business with or that you're related to or, that you know from one place or another. Have a Twitter account, so ask them. We didn't talk about promoting Twitter, but these days, it should be on your webpage, it should be on your business card, it should be on your blog. So follow those people as you're cruising around the web. You're going to see, follow me buttons everywhere. So follow them. It's not a big decision. You can unfollow them later, and then explore the users they follow. And then Twitter says you should follow these people. So like if you start, I guess I've mentioned the NBA a lot of times as an example, so we'll stick with that one. If you start making it pretty clear you're into the NBA, it's going to, and it'll figure out, oh, you like the Lakers, it's going to say, here's Kobe Bryant over here. So follow or keep your eye on what Twitter recommends, and the time you spend on Twitter and the effort you invest in Twitter is going to help Twitter suggest who to follow. So that happens to an experienced Twitter user like myself every day, where it says you should follow these people. And then I don't always look at that. I definitely always look at who followed me. And so before you make that decision to follow them back, you can look at their profile. That's why I mentioned using your profile, those 160 characters, carefully and putting keywords in there. So if I get to somebody and they're in a similar line of work, or they're potentially they're like the content manager at a big company or something like that, where they might be potential clients or partners, I'll follow them. So sorry about skipping slide 11. It's very important to know who to follow, and we've corrected that.
Okay, next question. If you're using Twitter for your job search, should you use wallpaper?
Yeah, you want to stand out. I wouldn't use wallpaper of a risque shot of yourself, but I think we uncork a whole new topic here called personal branding, and that wallpaper should be distinctive and memorable. If you have a website, it probably should look a little bit like it. Here's my Twitter page. I'm a copywriter. I asked my web developer to help me come up with something cool. Actually, I guess I came up with this myself, but he put it together for me. So I took a picture of my keyboard, and I highlighted the F, and I picked my company colors, and I put my logo there. So, you don't have to go quite that far if you're job hunting and your personal brand is simply a resume. But I think I'd put a little bit of effort into making your Twitter page stand out and look professional. Twitter has quite a few options there, so you can sort of make it look original just with the tools they offer. I think you can tile photos and stuff like that. I don't like busy Twitter backgrounds. And I mentioned, if you're looking at my screen, hopefully on a sizable screen yourself, you'll see that it's not exactly what I call responsive, because it didn't show me the entire contents there like it would on a phone, where it would get vertically stacked, but it hid the left side. So as you can see, I'm on an iMac with a rather enormous monitor, and it's not until we get very wide, these dimensions probably resemble a laptop, where you can actually see what I've done on the left. So you don't want to put anything in the middle or on the right. The right's going to be the first thing to go. and the middle is never going to be seen because that's where the feed is. So you've got this area to tinker with, and a lot of people put promotional information there.
Okay, next question. If this person creates a business Twitter profile, can they contact you for your opinion about how it looks?
Certainly.
Okay. Next question. Could you show Twitter's homepage?
Yeah. You know, maybe I can't show Twitter's homepage. I have to sign out of Twitter. I assume that that's not important to everybody on the call. So if you are signed on to Twitter, Twitter's homepage is this. You know, it says Barry's using it, and this is his stream or timeline or whatever you want to call it. While we're here, I'll give a quick look at these other things. You know, this is something I check often. Somebody just favorited my tweet. You know, that feels good. I shared something useful or I said something useful. You know, this recent span of time, these people followed me. Sorry, Andrew, but we're going to use you as an example. I would click that and go, oh, you know, should I follow him back? I currently don't, or that would say that I follow him. I'd say, oh, it looks like he's got some influence. Looks like he's been doing it a while, and then I would read this to see if we have anything in common. So that's what happens there. All the other things I mentioned, favorited, share, embed, reply, retweet, those would all be found here at the Connect. And I guess there's 2 pages under that, so not exactly sure what the difference here is. I guess mentions would be only tweets that had @FeldmanCreative on it, and interactions could be, you know, could be otherwise. Like this is an example. It does not have @FeldmanCreative on it, but Twitter is smart enough to know that it was a response to something I did.
Next question.
This is a place to see what's going on. Okay.
Is there a website that gives the abbreviations as to what they mean?
I don't know. That you know, if you did a Google search for that, I think you'd find that there's probably hundreds or thousands of them. Twitter has a awfully good help section, and they also have a great document. That's Rio, my miniature poodle. Let me see if I can pacify him. He wants in on this seminar or webinar. Yeah, I don't know. I would think the glossary of Twitter terms, you know, we covered the ones that are going to cover 90% or more of what you'll see. So we, you know, if you were there for the full hour, we didn't leave any out that you need to know to get started. But there probably are others. You'll certainly see text speak on there, you know, the whole LOL and, you know, laughing my butt off and all that stuff. Those are all there, and the glossaries are going to be published here and there. And if you're really looking out for, you know, how to use tweet speak for the purposes of getting started and getting by on Twitter, you already know that now based on what I've given you today. And when I put that presentation together, I forgot to mention this. I used one of the documents that Twitter published about getting started with Twitter. So if I don't want to dig that up now because it'll take some time, but I can dig it up and I can share it if you want something other than the resources I've offered here today.
Okay, in the minute that we have left, I want to encourage people to get in their final questions. Also, in the minute that we have left, I thought you might want to show a Hootsuite. I had some requests for that.
Yeah, Hootsuite's great. I have a free version of it. There's a paid version of it, just like there's a paid version of everything. And hopefully it's not going to ask me to sign in. Okay, so I am signed in. It usually remembers that. It might expire after a while. And so you can see, you know, my Facebook stuff's here, and my Google Plus stuff's here. Oops. All right, it was supposed to be, but apparently there's a problem with that. And so you can detect that I don't care that much about those. I mean, I don't not care about Facebook and Google Plus and LinkedIn, but I use other tools, or I use their tools. I use Hootsuite as my Twitter dashboard. And you should too. And so instead of clicking all around Twitter, it's showing me all those things that I just showed you. Here's what that page looked like, you know, that was called home. Here's what that page looked like that was called connect or at. So this is people talking about me. Here is a story that I published on my blog. Here is a story that I published on somebody else's blog. And I think you can make these 10 feeds wide. Here are direct messages, that only are happening with me, as we talked about. And I just discovered this today for some reason in doing research for this. I thought, I wonder if people talk about me by name instead of by company name. And clearly they do, although that feed's mixed up with one about Barry White, I think. So, that's not perfect. But that's what Hootsuite looks like, and it's free to try. And then even the paid version is free to use for some period of time.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in, and we're at the hour. So I want to thank you, Barry, for a great webinar. It was fascinating, and I enjoyed it. I'm sure our attendees enjoyed it as well. And we're going to close it down now. Thank our attendees for attending, and I wish you a great rest of the day.
All right, thank you, Alan, and the OLP. It was my pleasure to be here.
All right, thank you.